lean on us.
We are here for you.
You matter.
You are not alone.
Are you feeling overwhelmed? Not sure where to turn? The National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is there for you 24/7. Call or text 988 or chat at 988sc.org. Whether you're having an emergency or you know someone who needs support now, they can help you take the next step towards finding hope and healing.
There is hope. 988sc.org.
Discover, this is Daniela.
Hi, it's Jennifer Coolidge. I just want to thank you for making me feel so special. I earned cash back on debit for my dinner party groceries.
That's great, but with Discover Cashback Debit, we give everyone cash back on everyday purchases. Anything else I can help you with?
Do you like asparagus and mushroom sorbet? I've got leftovers.
Introducing Discover Cashback Debit, a checking account with cash back. It pays to Discover. Eligibility and terms at discover.com/cashback debit. Discover Bank, member FDIC.
Harris, geez. Next time wear a bell.
Why so jumpy, Larry?
Geeks make me nervous.
Is that really it, or is there something you're hiding?
I could hide my fist in your face.
I know your secret, big guy. I know what you've been doing at night.
You know, Harris, that nosy little nose of yours is going to get you into trouble someday. Like today.
Hurting me isn't going to make this go away. People are still going to find out.
All right. What do you want? Hush money? Is that what you're after?
I don't want anything. I just want to help.
What, you think you have a cure?
No, it's just... I know what you're going through because I've been there. That's why I know you should talk about it.
Now, that's easy for you to say. I mean, you're nobody. I've got a reputation here.
Larry, please, before someone else gets hurt.
Look, if this gets out, it's over for me. I mean, forget about playing football. They'll run me out of this town. I mean, come on. How are people going to look at me after they find out I'm gay? I said it, and it felt okay. I am gay.
I heard you the first time.
I can't believe it. It was almost easy. I never felt I could tell anyone. And then you of all people, you bring it out of me.
It probably would have slipped out even if I wasn't here.
No, because knowing you went through the same thing made it easier for me to admit it.
The same thing.
It's ironic. I mean, all those times I beat the crap out of you, it must have been because I recognized something in you that I didn't want to believe about myself.
Larry, no, I am not.
Of course not. Don't worry. I wouldn't do that to you. Your secret's safe with me.
Everybody, welcome to Still Slaying, a Buffy-verse podcast. I'm Penny.
I'm Kara.
And I'm Jim.
This episode, we're going to be discussing Season 2, Episode 15, Phases, directed by Bruce Seth Green, and written by J.W. Rob Deshotel, Dean Batali, and Marty Noxon. The original air date was January 27th, 1998.
And I'd like to welcome Jim to the podcast.
Yay!
Jim, tell us a little bit about your history with Buffy and also Podcastica. How'd you get involved?
Well, so, I feel like I've told this story a bunch, but it's a great story. So literally the third episode of the Walking Dead cast, I was looking for a podcast on The Mist, the movie The Mist. And it just so happens that on their third podcast, they talked about The Mist. It showed up in my feed when I searched, and which I don't know what it would have been, iTunes, I guess. And so me not at the time, like actually very anti like zombies. I walked into the podcast immediately, kind of like fell into the rhythm of Jason and Karen at the time, and so I've actually been part of Podcastica as a listener for 13 years, and just joined all the Facebook stuff about a year and a half ago, and joined the Patreon group like 4 months ago, and started doing some podcasts here and there. So I've been a part of Podcastica, it seems like, from the beginning, which is kind of fun. So I've run into all of you guys in different forms and fashions over the years. As far as Buffy goes, like, I've been dying to tell this story, but didn't want to tell it in any of the chats that we've done or anything like that, because it's weird. So in 2000, I grew up in this very small town, and there was this basketball player by the name of Mark Blucas. And there was this rumor that he was showing up on a television show. So, yeah. So I know nobody's mentioned Riley yet. I can probably guess why. But so we went to the rival school. So Mark Blucas already had a strike against him. Anyways, so actually I got into it in the strangest way. I just wanted to see Mark Blucas on a television show. But what's interesting about that is I watched one episode of Buffy, and I started to kind of research it in any way I could, and I was a message board guide at the time, but not a Buffy, but Buffy, when I started looking for it, that was the one show that was like everywhere. People were talking about it like crazy, but the big talk at the time was the spinoff show. So my wife and I had just moved to Raleigh, North Carolina, and we started watching Angel together, actually. Nice. So all of this Angelus stuff is crazy interesting. So now here's the funny part, though. So I started watching both shows at the time, and in my head, I've gone back and rewatched all of Buffy, but it was hard to do back then. And what I've realized as I'm doing the complete watch through with you guys is that a lot of these shows I've never seen before.
Oh, excellent.
Up until season 3. Like this show, I've never seen, but this episode that we're going to talk about today, I started watching it. I'm like, this is one of them. I've not seen this one before. I'm pretty sure I never watched even an episode of the first season. So watching that was very interesting. And as we get into, this episode, what's interesting to me is now, having rewatched it, I enjoyed the first season probably more than most. It's very interesting knowing Angel and Jealous the way that I do, kind of going back and watching the Stalker Boy. What's been really interesting to me is those last 2 episodes that you guys talked about. Really, I mean, as far as the show goes, like, you want to talk about a show hitting its stride.
Yeah.
I mean, the other shows were good. They were really good. But those 2 shows, to me, now knowing, I know a lot of the future already, but taking the past into account, this is where the depth comes from. I love Spike, but Spike gets so much depth. His character, and this is going to sound weird, gets so much thinner when we see him sitting in a chair next to Angelus, who is this really amazingly evil character that almost makes us understand Spike a little more about why he is who he is. So I'm a huge Angel fan. I love that show for a lot of different reasons, but like Charisma Carpenter, like seeing her character develop, Cordelia develop, like, because she's completely different. She's a little like that at the beginning. But like, I'm like watching this like mean girl, and you can sort of see it in really everything she does in Angel and Buffy. But it's just been such an amazing kind of like, it's filling up the characters for me, because some of these shows I've seen before, because you'd see them like over the summer, they'd pop up, or I'd do like a Netflix, like back in the day where you could get Netflix in the mail. I'd get a disc and it would be like in the middle of like season 2. So I'd seen the last 2 episodes already, just because I'm such an Angel stan. But David Boreanaz, like, and of course James Marsters, like Spike, those were like big deals to me. And I'm not going to say any spoilers about Spike, because obviously he plays a part, in the future of the show and the other show too. But knowing the end the way that I do, it just gave like this episode a lot of fulfillment for me, and it's just been fulfilling, just kind of catching up, and hearing you guys talk about it too. I think there's a lot of things that I've not taken into account, and you're all so thorough. So yeah, I've loved the rewatch. I'm one of the few that are like watching every episode.
That's
you spaced them apart kind of nice, so that they're not too far apart. There was like a 5-episode gap there where I felt like I was running a sprint, but
Yeah.
It's amazing to me like how well done these characters are, just kind of in the rewatch. I without really getting into Joss Whedon too much, but he does seem to have a pulse, which is weird. But anyways, I just absolutely have adored kind of going back and really filling in the gaps that I didn't have before. So and please, by all means, when we get to Riley, please have me back on.
Oh, definitely.
I have a lot to say.
Definitely.
I
That's
cannot
so
wait
funny.
to talk about all things Riley.
Oh,
And all
that
that
season,
is-
at the time, I was very irritated with season 4, but now
Like
it's
it
one of my
now.
favorites to rewatch. And I didn't like Riley back then, and now I like Riley because
he has his purpose.
he means well, and
He does.
Mark Lucas is he's a cutie pie, and he did a really horrible movie with Katie Holmes where she's a president's daughter, and he's secretly a Secret Service agent at her college. Oh, it's awful.
What is
But
that called?
I enjoyed it. There were 2 first daughter movies that came out together. One was Katie Holmes and one was Mandy Moore. And they came out like really close together. The Mandy Moore one is fun because they go to like the Berlin Love Fest and things like that. So it's better scenery.
You just unlocked a memory that I completely forgot that I had.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, first daughter. That exists. That happened.
Come to the podcast for Buffy. Stay for the regression therapy.
Oh my gosh. He was also in the Alamo. And I think I was in high school when that movie came out. And of course, being in Texas, that got a little more play around here, I think, than anywhere else. But those are my memories.
Well, he's really good friends with Freddie Prinze Jr. They were in a few movies together, which is interesting because
that makes sense.
Yeah, so they were in a baseball movie together, and
was he in Summer Catch?
That's it. Yeah, he was in Summer Catch. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I have not thought about that movie in so long.
Still slaying, where we get turned where we talk about Mark Lucas.
Yep.
You're welcome to everybody who's listening.
Gosh. Yeah. Anybody who has not gotten to that season yet must be very confused.
Yeah, they're like, who are they talking about? What?
Like, don't worry.
Trust us.
You'll find out.
When we get to season 4, you'll understand this conversation in retrospect.
True. Oh, gosh.
Kara, do you want to give us what was going on in the country at the time?
Good old Janet Jackson had the #1 song in the US with Together Again. And then Usher had the #1 song in the UK with You Make Me Wanna. And I remember listening to both of those songs repeatedly during this time. And of course, the Titanic is still #1 in the box office. And I looked that up. Titanic will be #1 in the box office for each of our season 2 episodes going forward until we cover, I think, the second to last episode of the season. So episode 19, which we're not covering, aired April 21st, 1998, and Titanic had been bumped down to #2 by Lost in Space by the beginning of April. So
that Lost in Space movie is so bad.
Is that the Matthew Perry thing?
Matthew, the other Matthew, Matt LeBlanc.
Yeah.
Matt LeBlanc, yeah. Oh gosh.
Titanic has a pretty solid run during season 2 of Buffy.
And we move away from the Clinton Lewinsky scandal for a week, I guess. Bill Clinton gave a State of the Union address where he discussed the federal budget, taxes, and focused on the budget deficit, then at $10 billion. The president also discussed education, foreign relations, science funding, development, space travel, and the internet. Which is kind of funny. In the speech, the president acknowledged the deaths of House of Representatives Walter Capps and, of course, Sonny Bono, who died, I believe, in a skiing accident way back when.
Skiing accident.
And the Lewinsky scandal was still going on strong, of course. I remember the one thing I remember about this State of the Union was how that was going to be addressed, or if it was going to be addressed, and it wasn't.
Because you're going to talk about it?
Yeah.
But all the commentators, they were all like, well, we know that the president and Ms. Lewinsky, like they didn't care about what he had to say.
Oh my gosh. I learned so much in 4th grade with the Bill Clinton scandal. I was educated way too quickly about certain sexual relations. I will never forget that.
I don't know how people look at the United States.
It's only gotten worse, I'm sure.
I know.
It clearly has.
I know.
It's like, you thought that was bad.
If you go back to the dominoes, like that may have been the first domino. I mean, it led right into the 2000 election, and then off to the races we go.
I feel like we could go back to Reagan, possibly Jimmy Carter. Anyway, this is not a political podcast, but it's gonna come up a couple times. But I did also want to note, we talked last week about, Innocence, that second half of that 2-parter was such a big deal, aired, Tuesday following Surprise on Monday right before it, and Innocence got 8.2 million viewers. The next week, when Phases aired, Buffy was competing with Clinton's 5th State of the Union address, and the viewership went down to 4.9 million viewers. So I'm curious to see. It is. Yeah. I think I would have been watching Buffy over the State of the Union address at that point, but I'm curious to see how that kind of plays out going forward and evens out, because 8.2 down to 4.9 was a pretty big jump. But
they must have really hyped that episode Innocence. I mean, with good reason.
I feel like
it's a pivotal episode. Yeah. But I think there was you're not going to believe what happens on Buffy this week. I think there was a lot of marketing push.
Back before we could fast forward through commercials or avoid them altogether.
Let's get into our main discussion, and Jim, as our guest, you get to go first.
All right. Well, I was going to start small, but I'm going to start big. I think this is obviously the first Oz-centric episode, so I want to talk about Oz, Seth Green. I think the one thing that this show has done really well is casting. I think the roles, I think Xander has kind of grown into his role a bit. I think Oz was the perfect casting choice, and he's so fantastic. This whole episode to me is summed up in his character has gotten little bit parts as we start to develop the Willow relationship, and of course we get the big kiss where Willow kisses Oz at the end. But the moment for me that sums up Oz to me is when he's he's laying in the woods naked.
Oh yeah.
Gosh.
If ever anybody, to me, if a character can sum something up with a noise or a grunt or a facial expression, it kind of says it all to me. And he leans up and he kind of looks around and he's like, huh.
Yeah.
And I mean, I started laughing so hard. And then the follow up to that is Oz calling his mom.
His aunt. Yeah.
His aunt. Yeah. Is Jordy a werewolf?
just casual question.
But the brilliant, and again, this kind of ties into the beginning. I totally, again, having never seen this episode, I one of my notes for later was just very obvious, like, "Ooh, I got bit in the arm." And the very subtle, he holds up his finger because his little nephew or cousin Jordy like had bitten him on the finger, and it didn't even occur to me. I mean, I knew Oz was I knew at the time that, you know, Oz was going to end up being the werewolf, but I didn't notice that until I watched it a second time, and I was like, did they mention the Jordy thing earlier? And then you see him, yeah, like, Jordy bit my little finger. And
Yeah.
he played that so well. And I love Oz so much. And the other part of this too is there were a couple of shots of Seth Green in this that were just like striking. He so reminds me of like kind of like I don't know. There was an actor that popped into my head, but like they really gave him good light in this episode. Like I was just really impressed with the facials that he gave, and he was just such a great character in this episode. And I don't really think he has a lot of episodes going forward, actually. But I really, really enjoyed this episode and the introduction of the werewolves and into this. And I've got another point about that later, but I just really thought Oz was fantastic. I've loved the character for a long time, but this is the first time I've seen kind of his first like Oz-centric episode.
Yeah, his origin story as a werewolf.
Him.
He's such a great angel foil because here is another, you know, romantic interest on the show who has a monster inside him that he can't control. And so it's this great comparison with Angel and the way Angel deals with it and the way Oz deals with it. And Oz does not change who he is at all. And, you know, he wants to keep people safe. He wants to keep Willow safe. He doesn't want to kill anyone. But he's not like, he never shows himself to be really freaked out. The most he is when he thinks for a few minutes that he's the one that killed Teresa. But otherwise he's like, he's always Oz. He's always this.
He's so chill.
Zen.
Even when he's trying to get Willow to leave, you know, his living room because he knows he's about to transform, he's still pretty calm in that situation. And I'm just like, gosh, he's so put together. But I think that's why I love dry humor. And I think that's a big reason why I love Oz so much. And there were so many fantastic quotes and pieces of dialogue in this episode. It was just chock full of them. But I think one of my favorites from the whole series is when, you know, Larry comes up to Oz with those guys, and he's just being kind of this typical crude teenage boy, and he's just like, you're dating a junior, I hope she's putting out, and like saying all this horrible stuff. And he goes, man, Oz, I would love to get me some of that Buffy and Willow action, if you know what I mean. And Oz just like deadpans, that's great, Larry, you've really mastered the single entendre. Every time I know it's coming, but it cracks me up. It's just so clever. And Larry, obviously, it just goes completely right over his head. And just, God, I love Oz. And I would watch a whole spinoff series just about Oz. And
100%.
It's just,
I would love it. Even today. Like, make it now. I would watch it.
Seth Green is aged really well. He can still do it. Like, I would tune in. But he is such an excellent actor. I feel like Oz is really underrated sometimes. People don't necessarily give him the credit he deserves. Because, I mean, and there's so many excellent performances on this show. But Oz coming in adds such an, I don't know, like you said, a foil of Angel, and just such an interesting layer to explore when it comes to teenage love and the idea of, you know, monsters within you and masculinity, because, and I guess that kind of point of masculinity is touched on so much in this episode, and it comes up a few more times in the series. And just like, you know, Buffy is kind of a trope turned on its head, this helpless blonde girl is now the one who's kicking ass and is the hero. The whole werewolf trope, metaphor, the idea of masculinity, all of these things that we have cultural expectations about are completely turned on their head in Buffy. And Oz really helps to do that.
Yeah, I mean, he is the opposite of sexually aggressive to the point that Willow is complaining about it, right? She's like, I want smoochies.
I want smoochies.
I want smoochies. And who wouldn't? I mean, Seth Green is so cute. And, Buffy even says, like, I think it's kind of cool that he's not being an animal. And then later when Giles describes, what a werewolf is, he says, oops, where'd my notes go? There it is. He says, you see, the werewolf is such a potent, extreme representation of our inborn animalistic traits that emerges for 3 full consecutive nights, the full moon and the 2 nights surrounding it. And Willow says, quite the party animal. Rupert, quite. And it acts on pure instinct, no conscience, predatory, and aggressive. And then there's Buffy's, one of my favorite Buffy lines. In other words, your typical male. And Xander says, on behalf of my gender, hey. And then Rupert says, yes, let's not jump to any conclusions. And Buffy says, I didn't jump. I took a tiny step, and their conclusions were.
That is a good line.
It's pretty fantastic because they do have Larry in this episode modeling the sort of typical what we now call toxic masculinity, right? This like harassing women and always like ready for a fight and bullying people and just performing this overt version of masculinity, as we find out, to cover up his own issues.
Yeah. Well, and then they throw Kane in on top of that to double down on it.
But you're a girl. Yeah.
Yeah.
That and the sweetheart, throwing that in there, he's like calling her sweetheart and just being, and that was hard. I was trying to come up with titles for different points and everything started to run together. So I was like, there's this whole treatment of masculinity and then there's sexism that is so rampant in this episode. And I think, a lot of that is intentional. Some of it I think is of the time, but a lot of it is definitely placed in there intentionally for us to examine. But gosh, Kane just, every time I see him, he just makes me ragey. And he seems so two-dimensional.
Yeah, he doesn't have any redeeming qualities, right? He murders werewolves for money, and he has no conscience about it. He doesn't care that they're humans.
That's why he only hunts them 3 days of the month.
The stereotypical, like, I've got one of their teeth. He's got the necklace that comes around.
He's got his little trophy.
So gross.
Yeah, and the funny thing about both Larry and Kane is, I think, even before that episode, but even in other like series and other movies, I think both are very stereotypically kind of drawn out. Like the Larry story is basically the same in another show, Glee. There's a character very similar to him I think, but I when I watched it the first time, I thought, why are they doing this so over the top? And when I watched it the second time, I'm like, well, that's the point. They did it on purpose to counterbalance. I mean, this was basically the theme of the episode, the toxic masculinity. And then on the other side of it, you have Oz, who's even the complete opposite, of Angel and jealous. And you get that moment with them, with Oz as the werewolf, and that kind of confrontation with Angelus, which I thought was just a brilliant moment. But we get to see those two interact, going forward in very interesting ways. And I think, having talked about how old Angel is and how young Seth Green looks, how young Oz is, even though he's a senior. Yeah, I mean,
what is he, 18? Yeah, he's a baby.
Yeah, and I love the counterbalance of the two of those characters with two of the main female characters. It's fantastic.
Well, and it's so nicely crafted where you have Angel as Angelus terrorizing, young pretty girl, and Oz as this other monster also terrorizing, young pretty girl, lover's lane. This, sexuality is also super present in this episode, definitely intentionally. But how different Angelus and Oz handle being monsters and their approach is fascinating. And Angelus is toying with, what's her name? Teresa? That's right.
Yeah.
Teresa. Yeah. He's toying with her and this false sense of security, and he's behaving in a traditionally masculine way. That's why she's just like, oh, you're a friend of Buffy's, and he's this tall, dark, and handsome guy. He's strong. He's offering to walk her home and basically protect her from whatever monster is out there terrorizing Sunnydale. And really, he's the scariest monster there is. And I don't know how intentional this was for the writers at the time, but it does seem very pointed, showing, how there are monsters within humans. Humans are the real monsters. Angel appears to be, this great, strong man that she can trust, but internally he's absolutely not trustworthy and thinking the worst.
And he's pretty, right? So there's this thing that people do, and we've all done it, where you see somebody who's good looking and you sort of assume that means other good things about them until it's proven wrong. And there's, they call it like pretty privilege. I was in the most recent Doctor Strange movie, there's a scene where like a girl and a monster both like pop out of a portal from another dimension, and Doctor Strange leaps into action to kill the monster looking thing. And I'm always like, you don't know which one of them is the bad guy. Like, what are you doing, dude? It's just because that one looks like a monster. That girl could be the problem. And this is a great example. Like, Angel looks great. He's real pretty, dresses nice, like sometimes a little overly dramatic, but still. And
very in style for the 90s.
He is the most dangerous person in Sunnydale. Buffy says, when I was failing to protect Teresa from, or when I thought I was failing to protect Teresa from the werewolf, I was actually failing to protect her from something worse. And I think she counts Angel as worse because, the werewolf can't really help what it's doing. And Angel is 100% in control of what he is doing.
Calculated. So calculated.
And that was even before Teresa turned out to be a vampire, and then she's like had to slay her, which was so sad. Actually, doesn't Xander slay Teresa?
He does.
Yeah,
with
that's his
easel.
First ever vampire kill on his own.
On his own and on purpose.
Yeah.
On purpose.
Right, he accidentally kills Jesse.
Which is interesting that that's his first kind of like save the day moment, saving Buffy, and they have that weird lingering hug. And I was like, is that a coincidence that he is exhibiting, like, this whole show with masculinity, he exhibits this kind of masculine trait of protecting her, and they have that moment, and I hate that moment. I really do, because it makes me, I cannot stand Buffy and Xander tension.
No.
Especially after
I think
what
she is purely grateful in that scene, and he's the one who wants to turn it into something more, something romantic.
What does he say? He's like, my life's not complicated enough.
Yeah, that's
Xander, calm down.
Again, like, knowing the future and not really knowing the past of the show until now, like the whole Xander character, the first season and a half is so like I'm
He's
still
unbearable.
I can't figure it out for the life of me. I've got another point about him later, but this whole episode I'm like, what the hell are you doing, dude? Like, what the hell's happening?
He infuriates me. And like, he basically, if we're talking about Xander, that was basically one of my points because of how frustrated I get with him. And we've talked about this before, where I try to keep in mind that he is portraying a teenage boy. He's not going to be perfect. He has a lot of maturing, growing up to do. I try to keep that in mind, but son of a bitch. He just makes me so mad sometimes. Where poor Willow has been in love with him for years. He knew it. He knows it. And now he's with Cordelia. And, you know, Willow was hurt by that. But now that Willow is getting attention from another guy and giving her attention to another guy, all of a sudden he's jealous and kind of weirdly possessive and protective. And it makes me so angry because I was just like, come on, man. Like, she's one of your best friends. You had an opportunity for years, and now it's like somebody else is playing with a toy that you thought was yours, and he's getting pissy about it, which I get. Like, that is a very teenage thing dynamic.
While he's dating while he's literally dating the like anti them, like
what should be like
the,
his
the prettiest girl in school or whatever,
like head cheerleader, homecoming queen type, and they're at Lover's Lane, and he keeps bringing up Willow, and obviously we haven't seen all the mentions of Willow because Cordelia is just like, what the hell, man? Like,
she's like, enough
what is that? Like, why are we still talking about Willow? We're supposed to do things that, we can never tell my dad about because he still thinks I'm a good girl. And it's clearly been an issue in their new relationship. And I'm like, man, Xander, like, he wants what he can't have.
I made a sound clip of the scene where Willow and Cordelia are bonding in the bronze.
I love that.
And I'm gonna play it right now. I think it's time.
Who do they think? A couple of guys.
I mean, with Xander, it's always Buffy did this, Willow said that, Buffy, Willow. It's like I don't even exist.
I sometimes feel like that.
And then when I call him on it, he acts all confused, like I'm the one with the problem.
His do I smell something look.
All a part of his little guy games. It's like he's there, but then he's not there, and he wants it, but then he doesn't want it.
He's so busy looking around at everything he doesn't have, he doesn't even realize what he does have.
Well, he should at least realize that you have Oz.
I'm not sure I do. Oz and I are in some sort of holding pattern, except without the holding, or anything else.
What's he waiting for? What's his problem? Oh, that's right, he's a guy.
Yeah, him and Xander, guys.
What do they think they are?
A couple of guys.
And then, it's Sunnydale, so of course a werewolf drops in on the conversation, literally, from the roof, and all hell breaks loose at the bronze. That window gets broken at the bronze again. I should start keeping count of how often that window gets broken.
Seriously. Poor bronze. They must have excellent insurance.
What's funny about that scene too is the whole first segment of the episode is literally Willow slamming the hell out of Cordelia with that one quote. What's his number? Oh yeah, 1-800 I'm dating a skanky hoe. And the filming of that episode, that scene, they start off on Cordelia, and it slowly pans back, and you realize she's talking to Willow, and I was like, what the hell is happening here? She's this episode was filmed so well. That part especially, I love the counterbalance.
Well done.
And the interaction between these characters, like Willow's literally Cordelia too. They're literally okay, so now we're gonna be friends because this is who we're talking about. Which is fun. That is a stalwart of Willow as a character, I think is in a lot of these characters, but I just love that, again, the counterbalance of, okay, I hate her, and now we're sitting at the bronze bitching about Xander.
It's
so
also typically teenage.
It's so teenage, exactly. Your feelings about people change based on circumstance. And if you suddenly have something in common with someone that you didn't before, or you didn't know about before, it changes everything. And then the next thing you know, you're friends, and you're like, oh, I never expected to be friends with this person. I thought I hated this person. Or it goes the other way where you're like, I thought we were friends and now I hate them.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think that is one thing the writers do so well with Cordelia's character. I think her character development is very well done. It's not rushed or anything like that. And the acceptance of her into the Scooby Gang by the other characters is also done very carefully. Like Willow, obviously, because they really kind of hated her and had this butting heads kind of rivalry relationship where she was almost essentially bullying them for a time. And now, Willow's not 100% on board. They're not 100% on board with Cordelia, but they're getting there. And watching her bond with Cordelia in the same episode where she made that 1-800 I'm dating a skanky hoe comment, I think it just kind of helps us remember that they're still getting there. They're still growing. But I do love that meow when Buffy's like, meow, and Willow's just like, really? Like, I've never gotten a meow before.
It's so cute,
so
and
precious,
wholesome. She's like a little bunny. She's so fresh faced about the world, and everything is new.
What is Oz makes that comment without spoiling anything when he says to Larry, he's like, oh yeah, she's an evil mastermind.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
full of surprises. I was just like, hee.
Yeah. Spoilers.
Cheeky Oz. It's a good cheeky Oz moment.
There's so many cheeky Oz moments. Like
And
when
Giles.
Buffy gets frustrated with Larry and just dumps him on the mat,
I love
flips him
that.
over, and Oz is like, that'll work.
Yeah, that one
like,
moment might as well
so
be one
understated.
of my points because it's so fantastic.
Oh,
and she's,
it's so great.
Willow's like, remember, you're helpless, like, teenage girl, like, don't do anything crazy. And Larry is, sexually harassing, basically assaulting Buffy, just full on grabs her ass. And at that point, she just lays him out. And it's perfect. Every time. I'm just like,
Yeah.
you deserve that, Larry.
It's so satisfying.
Really, really did.
But can I just throw this out here, though? Like, she was all tentative. They were tentative, like, Buffy, you can't do this. But she's already, like, beating the hell out of Larry, correct?
Or at least sort of roughed him up a little bit.
Yeah. She came in
shut
to
him
save
down.
Xander at the vending
Yeah,
machine.
that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, she shoved him into the vending machine. Yeah,
And made a Coke with her strength.
and she goes, "Ooh, diet." Yeah, it's a great scene. As if the Slayer needs to, like, watch her calories. Her metabolism must be off the chart. She must need to eat, like,
That's right. That's probably
10,000 calories a day.
An aspect of being the chosen one. Her metabolism is off the charts. She's got like a Michael Phelps dietary need.
Yeah.
During the Olympics. Goodness gracious.
Lean on us.
We are here for you.
You matter.
You are not alone.
Are you feeling overwhelmed? Not sure where to turn? The National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is there for you 24/7. Call or text 988 or chat at 988sc.org. Whether you're having an emergency or you know someone who needs support now, they can help you take the next step towards finding hope and healing.
There is hope. 988sc.org.
Okay, so this episode, obviously, we have that great scene where Xander, first of all, accidentally admits that he remembers being a hyena, and then confronts Larry about being the werewolf and unknowingly prompts Larry to come out to him. And I just want to take us back in time a little bit to 1998. Up until 1997, there was no gay main characters on any TV shows. There had been a handful of gay characters, like Billy Crystal's character on Soap. There was a gay character on One Life to Live, I think. There was a gay character on All in the Family, but they were all, like small side characters.
Well, and
Ellen came
just
out
happened, right?
in 1997, both on the show and in real life simultaneously. I remember the Time magazine cover. It just said, "Ellen's gay," and it was just a big picture of Ellen. It was a huge deal. The show lost sponsors. it had an effect on the corporate relationship between Disney and ABC. I mean, it threw all kinds of people into a tizzy. But of course, Ellen DeGeneres is so likable that it sort of worked out. And then in '98, Will and Grace started airing, which had many gay characters and a very strong focus on and I had to correct myself on this, the white, affluent New York City gay subculture, very specific version of the gay subculture. And
Ease America into it, apparently.
Yeah. In 1999, Dawson's Creek had a gay character, Jack, played by Kara Smith, who had the first gay male kiss on TV. The first woman-to-woman kiss was earlier. It was LA Law, and it was done... Like, it was very sensationalized. It was a ratings thing. It wasn't really a real story. And it was advertised like, it was ridiculous, the advertising at the time. They were like, oh, and it was very like, ooh, you're going to get to see two chicks make it out. Like, it wasn't...
Sexualized.
It was exploitative instead of liberating. Yeah. And then 2003, Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, 2004, The L Word, and then 2009, Glee, which is a very, forward presenting show that had a lot of great queer representation. But up until even Glee, like, bisexual characters on TV, forget about it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, trans characters, no. It wasn't until we got Laverne Cox on Orange is the New Black that trans characters became more commonplace, although arguably Radar in MASH is a trans character. It's hard to say what to think about that. It's either really homophobic or really progressive, depending on your perspective. But the atmosphere at the time was super homophobic. Larry was legit scared that people would find out and that he would like lose his place on the football team and he wouldn't have friends anymore. And he's like, they'd run me out of this town. And it's only underlined by Xander's like complete panic at the idea that anyone thinks he's gay, right? He's like, nothing happened with Larry. Shut up. I don't want to talk about it. Like he's terrified about it. And I remember that was one of the things I really hated about the show Friends in the 90s also, was that Matthew Perry's character was so afraid of being perceived as gay.
Yeah. There are lots of things about Friends that now when you look back on it, especially, like even then, might cause a pause. But now watching it, she's like, ooh.
Yeah, it's painful. It's really, I can't stand it now. But at the time in 1998, this was incredibly progressive TV. It was one of the sort of groundbreaking representations of a gay teenager on TV, and that they showed him, he didn't have any of the stereotypical gay qualities of being like effeminate or weak-wristed, all that stuff that was big in the 80s and 90s of like showing gay characters as being, they're all interior decorators and they all speak with a lisp and all those other stereotypes that we were used to seeing back then. It was considered pretty progressive that Larry comes out.
I do like that development for Larry. I like that storyline, and I think especially for the time, for 1998, they handled it very well, because you immediately have empathy and sympathy for him and the struggle for being like this big buff football player and feeling like he can't be himself. And I'm always torn about that moment with Xander, because for Larry, he is having this like wonderful moment, which is the first time he seems to have really admitted it to himself, and he's essentially coming out to Xander, and he sees it as this moment of connection, whereas Xander is over there freaking out. And as I was looking up stuff for the episode, I came across a couple of articles and like commentaries or comments on Reddit about how admirable it is and how nice of Xander it was to keep Larry's secret. And I was like, he didn't do that for Larry. He did that because he didn't like that Larry thought he was gay. Like, that was Xander panicking. That was not Xander respecting the fact that, you know, he shouldn't out somebody else, or understanding that this might be difficult for Larry. I was like, let's not give Xander too much credit. Like, that's not what that was. But it is a nice moment for Larry, at least. And I like that they did it in a way that seemed completely natural and with the story. There's, you know, a lot of the English major in me is going to come out. But in literature, over the years, there's been, you know, a variety of things that a werewolf can symbolize. And there was, you know, a time period, I think pretty much if we focus on 60s, 70s, 80s, where werewolves were very queer-coded, and there was a lot of focus on being other and being different. And the fact that Larry comes out in this episode, I don't think it's a coincidence when you're talking about any sort of repressed urges, and he's trying to keep all of this in. And just, I nerded out really hardcore with all the werewolf symbolism. I'm not gonna lie, you should see my notes. But
you and Giles, right? He was like, "Oh, my books are in for a fascinating afternoon."
He was precious. I was like, "Is Giles high? Like, what is going on? Or is he just like so giddy that they get to talk about werewolves?" Well, the
moon pie quote was my favorite quote of the whole. When he started laughing,
so
everybody was
funny.
like, he's like, ha 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 ha. Oh.
Yeah. His little giggle.
Everybody's
and
looking
Buffy
at him like,
is,
what
like,
is happening?
Yeah. And that's such an excellent kind of like silent moment between Sarah Michelle Gellar and Allison Hannigan as Buffy and Willow, because the look they give each other and then the look they give Giles, it's just so perfect. And he immediately becomes a little self-conscious, like, all right, fine, I thought it was funny. But he's so precious. He's like, you know, it's one of the classics. Like, my books and I are in for a fascinating afternoon. I was like, you are, Giles. You have fun.
So cute. Yeah, Kane sort of calls him on being a dork, too. Kane is like, this guy looks like he's auditioning to play a librarian. The look on Giles' face, he's like, oh, like, that hit.
But you can see like a little hint of Ripper about to come out when Kane makes that comment about, you know, implying that they're
it's
together.
It's good to get the fruit. It's good to get the fruit while it's
so
fresh.
Gross.
And but Giles, she has to hold Giles back, and you know, again for the spoiler talk, but
Giles.
he starts lunging and she holds him back, and God, what a quote though. Oh God!
But it's an
Kane is the
interesting
worst.
play again on the idea of masculinity. Like he obviously Kane both like he sees both of them as weak. Buffy just because of the pure fact that she is not a man, like she's a girl. And Giles because he sees him as more intellectual and perhaps effeminate, which obviously makes him weak, having a characteristic that's close to a woman. And it's just, I don't know, the whole
it's
episode.
What makes it so satisfying when Buffy takes his gun and bends it and is like, why don't you let the door hit you in the ass on the way out of town? And you can see Giles being like, yeah, you tell him, Buffy, like, get him. I found this fun piece of trivia that some physicists figured out. Buffy bending the gun.
Oh, I saw
that it must have been 240 meganewtons per meter squared, or 35,000 pounds per square inch. So,
God,
that's just like unbelievably strong. And I think the only other character I've ever seen do that is Superman, like bend a gun.
Yeah.
To make it no longer usable.
The $6 million man used to do it.
Oh, really? Awesome.
Yeah. The laws of
that
physics
show very well.
mean nothing if you're the chosen one.
But this is what makes Buffy the character. Like when she beat up, I almost said Jack Tripper. When she beat up John Ritter's character, like the audible cheer. Like I think the beauty of this show is she's the ass kicker of the show. I mean, we have all of these masculine characters. We have Angelus, we have Spike, we have Oz as the werewolf, but at the end of the day, we know that Buffy's the ass kicker, which is really what makes this show very interesting. Because like one of my notes kind of fitting into this was transformation, and I think the show in and of itself is a transformation, and it really is very forward thinking, and it really has led to a lot of other strong feminine characters. But this one's done in some ways very comic booky, in some ways very soap opera, but in some ways very authentically, where you have a high school girl who's the female lead who also kicks everybody's ass, and is also kind of the especially as the show goes on, is the one you come back to kind of calm the episode down. Like at the end of the day, while this was an Oz-centric episode, like the end of the episode was her bending that gun. I mean, it ends up with Willow and Oz again, but again, the masculinity per se ends with the feminine character kicking Kane out of Sunnydale. So I just absolutely, again, I think that Buffy is just this fantastic character but the beauty of this writing is that she was not the center of this episode, and especially coming off the past of Surprise and Innocence, I think it shows that just this show hitting its stride, where the all the main focus was on Oz. You get Angelus for that little bit of time. It's on these really masculine characters, and Buffy's just doing her Buffy thing. But at the end of the day, Buffy's kind of holds it all together.
Yeah. The fashion is a lot better in this episode on That's Buffy. True. She's got some nice jackets. She's dressed a lot better than usual. They got Willow in another dopey hat. At the beginning, she's in that like ski hat. Like, what are you doing? You live in Southern California in the desert. Like, why are you wearing a hat in the sun? And then, she's got sort of Humpty Dumpty looking overalls on for a while. She's always wearing too many colors. It's so frustrating to watch, knowing that Allison Hannigan in real life is this like gorgeous chic person, and you see her as Willow, and it's just like they just frumped her up as much as they possibly could.
But she does have that little fawn shirt on when they're talking about mauling bunnies.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
She's like, you mean like bunnies? No, don't tell me.
And the whole time I'm looking at that little fawn on her shirt. I'm like, oh,
that's what a werewolf would be.
Yeah. Right. Goodness gracious. Well, and that also, the way that Oz becomes a werewolf in itself subverts expectations, because obviously you hear Larry talking about like this dog bite and he had to get all these stitches, and Oz holds up his little finger and he's just like, yeah, my cousin Jordy took a nibble. Like, he's like, apparently he doesn't like being tickled, and it comes off as a joke, and that's what's so brilliant about it. And then you realize, holy shit, that's how he became a werewolf. And thinking about just the implications of that too, with his and Willow's romantic relationship going forward. She makes a comment at the end, kind of like, well, no biting. It's like, that might be kind of difficult, actually. Like, how obviously Jordy didn't seem to bite him very hard. Like,
yeah, he's a baby.
Oz, he didn't even have a Band-Aid.
Right? Like, if he nibbles on Willow's ear or something when they're making out or something, like, is that enough? Like, that sounds terrifying. Like, what if you forget?
Yeah, I guess they need some kind of mystical werewolf prophylactic.
Yeah. Which is also funny, since
prevent the spread of werewolfism.
Oh, yeah. And how often,
I'm sorry, lycanthropy.
Symbolize unrestrained like sexuality and primal urges and all this stuff. It seems very appropriate.
It's
just with teenagers especially.
Werewolves are unrestrained and sexual, right? The werewolf is drawn to sexual like pheromones. That's how they know where to find it. And Oz is in no rush to push Willow into having sex. He's not a werewolf when he's Oz. It's so charming.
I don't think this is too big of a spoiler, but werewolves obviously have, heightened scent. And there's one point in the series where he mentions being able to smell Willow and kind of find her in that way. And that in itself, I was like, that's kind of like there's sexual undertones there. Like there's just so much underlying it. And it's brilliant. Like we've talked about it so many times, how they take monsters and all of these supernatural things to talk about the teenage and high school experience. And this episode is one of the best examples of that in the series. It's just fascinating. Even there's that callback to, I think it's season 1 episode 3, the witch episode.
Oh yeah.
Like when like Oz is staring at the trophy case and Will comes in, he's like, it's like eyes are following me. And instead of being like creeped out or anything, he's like, I kind of like it. But that episode was, this mother kind of trying to live vicariously through her daughter and relive her golden years, and all of these tiny little callbacks that are spot on for the theme that we're dealing with just make me happy.
Yeah.
It's so well planned.
Well, that's what makes the show great. I love that they do the callbacks, because this was a Monster of the Week episode. It does launch a lot of things forward. But the series, even when you get to Angel, like has always been really good at pulling back from the past. And even as the show goes on, again, this isn't too spoilery, creating a past to pull from as well, since we can go back hundreds of years with the vampires. And then the other part of that you mentioned that I love is, I remember when I started watching in the middle of the series, thinking how shows like this, when they're done right, remind me of Star Trek from the 60s. And no, not science fiction or anything like that, but what Star Trek could do because it was done in the future. There was a lot of like lines that they could cross because of it being in like the 2200s, that people even in the 60s could accept. I think this does that very well, especially with toxic masculinity. It kind of comes back over and over again. But like in this episode, I mean, it's so clear that they put the transformation episode of Oz into the werewolf with Larry's transformation. It's so clear that they put these together for a reason. And again, like you said, Penny, it launches other episodes forward. It's kind of, I don't know that it's the big brick that falls, but it's certainly the first little pebble that kind of opens the door up to a lot of other episodes, which is important. And again, like taking the series into account and Joss Whedon into account, it's hard for me to fathom that he's the one that kind of like started some of this stuff, but the series certainly did. And again, part of it's the cast. Like, they play it so well, and they play it in a way that's very innocent, because it's a high school at this point. It's a high school drama. They play it so well, and it's so non-threatening, but at the same time, if you give it a chance, like there's such a depth to it. And I hope that like if people get to this podcast and they haven't filled in the episodes that you aren't covering, it's really important that you do that, because there is even in the very thin episodes, there's a depth to the entire series that they pull from as these characters start to develop. Spike is a great example of that, especially going forward. But all of these characters, and Xander, I think when you look at Xander down the road, as opposed to now Willow, when you look down the road, the build up to who they eventually become is so important in all of these shows. And while this one emotionally is quite different from the past 2 episodes, I think, again, they did it so well. They throw Angel in the episode just enough to let us know how big of an asshole he is Angelus. And again, you really, and you talked about this in your latest podcast about like David Boreanaz. I think he's again, how perfect this cast is, like how good he is as his transformation back to Angelus. I mean, it's just these transformations that we get to see. the phases. I mean, they talk about phases, and if you go back to the end of, it's funny because when you first gave me this episode and I watched Innocence, one of the when Spike and Drusilla and Angel are sitting there, and he strikes the match and lights the cigarette. And he says, "I'm just going through a phase. I was just going through a phase." And I was like, "Ooh,
phases."
I mean, mic drop.
Like,
I mean, that's the mic drop, right? Like for the next episode. And I just think that this show, like this episode, this title episode, is so important now and then again going into the future of the show, because these characters go through so many phases between now and the end. And
that's what adolescence is, right? It's just one phase after another where you're trying to figure out who you are and who everyone else is. And this whole season is about how people are not what they seem on the surface. Even if you think you know someone really well, they probably have a secret or two or three or something dark. And that doesn't always mean that person isn't still who you think they are, right? Oz is still Oz. He has this big secret. It comes out. He even says, like, I'm going to need a couple days to process this. Yeah. But he's still Oz. But, Angel's secret turned out to be really dangerous. Giles's secret was really dangerous. And now, if I were Buffy, I would be looking around me being like, who else in this high school is a monster that I don't know about? Like, are there other things you can transform into? Like,
it's funny that I think this is, I kind of, as I was, researching, doing my notes for this episode, there was one article that wasn't super spot on, but it just seemed to really capture kind of the essence of this episode and Buffy as a whole. And we can link it. I'll send you the link to put in the show notes because it is a really interesting read. But it's by Catherine Schwab from The Atlantic back in October of 2015. And it's called The Rise of Buffy Studies. And it kind of details and goes into the scholarly, Lord.
Too many L's.
Yeah, I was like, why? It's not
academic.
Yeah, academic interest in, this cult classic at this point. And one of the quotes that just stood out to me is that in Buffy, she said, monsters act as physical stand-ins for societal differences and threats. Vampires symbolize sexual predators, werewolves represent bodily forces out of control, and witches tap into tropes about how female power and sexuality is seen as threatening. By fighting the big bad, Buffy and her friends fight the monsters everyone faces, oppressive authority figures, meaningless rules, confining social norms, sexual awakening, loneliness, redemption, in other words, the terrors of growing up and finding one's way in the world. And I was just like, that is perfect. Like, that is exactly why I think this series has continued to be popular and so rewatchable, and there are new generations tuning in and finding something from it because it is kind of like this one long coming of age arc, just with more monsters than normal and a lot of other fun supernatural things. But I think that especially when we look at Oz as a werewolf and Angel's turning back into and jealous after he and Buffy sleep together for the first time. None of that's, coincidental. And even, kind of the slasher flick opening of this episode was Xander and Cordelia and her dad's car. And, there's a monster on the loose. Like, all of that is just so spot on. Oy.
Oh, I love the scene in the car. And I love the scene when Buffy and Giles are hunting the werewolf at Lover's Lane. And Giles asks her if she's seen anything. Oh, yeah. And she's like, yes, this person was with this other person. And if her boyfriend found out that she was with this other guy. And the look on Giles's face is like, monsters, have you seen any? And then he's like, let's knock on the windows and ask people if they've seen anything. And Buffy's like, Giles, nobody's seen anything. It's like, dude,
paying attention.
But see that, like,
read the room.
We talk about the complexities of people like doing studies on the episode, but at the core of it, like Buffy's a junior in high school, you know? I mean, and the fact that it stays grounded like that is what makes the show so fun, and why I absolutely love this episode, especially coming after the last two. We get another monster of the week. It's still connected to the last two, but at the end of the day, and it's got all this core masculinity, but it's so full of the quips. Like we've mentioned almost all of them up to this point, but it's so full of quips and it's so full of that high school humor that I still think is amazing. And I think that's the depth of the series is how even it does get, again, not to get too spoiler, we do head down a path, I think, as the series goes, but it always stays rooted in that quippy humor and that high school and college kind of fun, and that's what always makes the show fun and worth watching.
Yeah. The dialogue is it's famous for the quippy, witty dialogue, the pop culture references, the speed of the dialogue. It's, you know, it's a patter, which was also one of the features of Gilmore Girls, also popular around this time, and West Wing was known for its rapid patter.
Very, was it Amy Sherman Palladino and Aaron Sorkin-esque, for sure. That pacing. I do like, too, that one line. Now I'm just remembering quotes, but, you know, when Oz and Willow kind of have their little moment in their chat, there are two things that I just love. One, when she's like, you know, I mean, 3 days of the month, I'm not much fun to be around either. Like, kind of trying to be like, don't worry, PMS gets to me. Like, you're a werewolf, it's all fine. And when she says, like, you know, I'm sorry how this all ended up with, you know, me shooting you and all, and he's just like, it's okay, I'm sorry I almost ate you. She's like, it's okay. And like this sweet little moment that just seems like they're just, you know, two high schoolers getting over this little argument that they had in their brand new relationship, and it's just so
it's
nonchalant.
Just so Sunnydale.
You know, with me shooting you and all. Like,
I'm sorry I almost ate you is a hilarious thing to say to someone out of context. It's kind of Yellow Jackets, right? Like, oh, sorry I almost ate you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh. But it's just so precious. And the way they deliver those lines, especially those two, there's an innocence about them and just like this purity and sweetness that makes them really fun to watch, and it just feels so genuine.
Yeah, there's nothing that makes me have any misgivings about Oz as a boyfriend for Willow. There's no moment where I'm like, well, but he did do this thing or he did do that other thing. Like, it's literally just the werewolf thing. There's no other negatives to Oz at this point. He's true.
I think
kind
we
of perfect.
talked about that before. Like, he's an ideal. For a first
last week
boyfriend.
when we were talking about his the freeze frame speech and just how patient he is and willing to meet Willow where she is and wait for her is beautiful, because that was not my experience of teenage boys.
No.
For the most part, they all seem to think that if they didn't like touch your boob really fast, they had lost some kind of game. I don't know.
Or there was an actual bet about which one of them could grab your boob and get away with it. We had a whole assembly in 8th grade about like groping and bra strap snapping and all sorts of stuff. We could talk about that forever. But yeah, Oz is a very nice, healthy representation of masculinity, of, you know, this mature teenage boy for Willow to be involved with.
Yeah,
God, I love Oz.
Well, and the funny thing about it too is Larry, even when he's acting like an asshole, he's treating Oz like one of the guys. And again, like, so Oz has weight. Oz plays in a band. Oz is very unassuming, but everybody seems to like him. He's one of those kids, I think, that has friends of all different kinds. And honestly, being a werewolf gives him that thing that can put him with the Scooby Gang now, because he's got something to hide, just like everybody else. And I think that just adds to his character, especially going forward, with whatever happens next. But I think, again, kind of a trend setting thing is having non-typical like roles, and he's a very non-typical role, because I think everything that you just described about high school boys is what you typically see in shows. And again, Glee to me is kind of a bookend with this show, because I think that series is all about non-typical roles, quarterbacks being singers, and the LGBTQ plus side of that show is fantastic. That just keeps recycling. That I think Buffy, we get to see a glimpse of that with Buffy here.
Yeah. Gosh, and Oz is just, I think, kind of what you said sparked what it really is that stands out about him, is he is just so non-threatening as a person.
Without being a wimp.
Weak.
Yeah.
Right. He has this kind of stoicism, this strength that almost emanates from him. Like, he's so self-assured and confident. That's kind of why, he's so unbothered by Larry, like, giving him shit. He's like, all right, man, like, get it out. Like, let's go through this. And he's, cerebral. Like, he
really knows who he is. And you see comparisons, if you read articles about him and Xander, and what separates the two of them is, I don't know if the writers knew who Xander was, but they're both male characters. They're both quippy, but like Seth Green plays it like he knows who he is from jump, except for the fact that he's a werewolf. Whereas Xander really is all over the place. He really is just all over the place. And that's what
he's deeply insecure, right? Xander is insecure about everything all the time. And he contradicts himself, and he goes back on things. The one thing he's consistent about is that when the what really does hit the fan, he steps up. Whenever he has the opportunity, like we were talking about last week, that he grabbed that cross and got Willow away from Angel, and this week he saves Buffy by staking Teresa. He has moments where he gets clarity and he acts on his heroic impulse, but then he always ruins it afterward by going back to being insecure and wanting too much praise, or like thinking he gets a sexual reward and jealousy. Yeah. But he feels entitled. He is heroic in moments, and it makes it understandable why Buffy and Willow still hang out with him, because he is annoying in so many ways. But then when they really need him, he's always there. And every now and then with Buffy, he shows a real understanding of what she's going through and says things to her that actually really help. Like in this episode, he says, don't let him get to you. He's not the guy you knew. As much as he always hated Angel, he knows that
cares
Buffy loved
about
him.
Buffy.
Yeah.
He has empathy. Like, that's one of the things. Xander does have empathy. They can't make him completely insufferable. Like, that wouldn't make any sense. And he just, he's struggling, like he's growing up, and that insecurity really takes over sometimes. But I think the show also shows how damaging that is to, not only to him, but to the relationships around him. And that comes up, multiple times where we see him struggle with this type of issue. And I don't know, like, as much as I can't stand Xander sometimes, I think he's an important character, and it's important for us to see that depicted on the show. It'd be boring if everyone was Oz. There'd be no conflict.
It's true. If the whole world was Oz, like, the world would be at peace. We'd have a really lovely
in real
planet.
life, it'd be great.
Yeah.
But for
Oz
entertainment purposes.
President of every country. Just like, all Oz everywhere.
If Oz could be president, it'd be excellent.
God.
The State of the Union would be like, things are going good. I'm on it.
Lots of head nodding. Just kind of like, yep. Plays Does he play guitar or bass? I can never.
I think
remember.
he plays guitar.
He
He's the lead guitarist.
He definitely plays guitar. I feel like I've seen him with a bass too, but he when he's sitting
he's a Renaissance man.
A couple of episodes ago he was sitting like in the quad and he was playing a 6-string acoustic, so he definitely plays guitar.
Yeah. He's always ragging on his own musical ability and
he's humble too.
And saying how they need to practice. I don't know if it's a spoiler or not. There's that episode where he's talking to whoever's the singer in his band, and he's like, there are some bands that know like 3-4 whole different chords. And then the other guy goes, oh, that's just like fruity jazz bands.
It's like, all right, man.
Yeah. It's such a great moment. Oh,
that is another good moment with Xander and Cordelia when Xander's having his like Oz and Willow jealousy moment, and he mentions about how Oz is in a band and, you know, this kind of stereotypes about guys in bands, and Cordelia's like, I've dated guys in bands, and he's like, thank you, yes, like,
yeah,
let's not talk about that. It's like, oh, Xander,
he's so mean to Cordy sometimes.
He is. I'm like, stop talking about Willow, and it's like palpable jealousy, and he doesn't care.
Yeah.
And when he has, like, you know, Oz, what does he tuck Willow's tag in or something when they're...
Oh, when they're in gym class.
Yeah. And he's like, look at that. He's all over her. And if I were Cordelia, I would not be okay with that. Like, and clearly she's not, because she talks to Willow about it.
Of
later.
All people, right? Like, it drove her into Willow's arms because that's how upset she was with Xander.
It's just... Ugh.
Oh, it makes me happy to be about next week's episode.
Yes.
That's going to be a fun one to cover.
That is a good one. I mean, they're all good, but that one will be fun for sure.
Lean on us.
We are here for you.
You matter.
You are not alone.
Are you feeling overwhelmed? Not sure where to turn? The National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is there for you 24/7. Call or text 988 or chat at 988sc.org. Whether you're having an emergency or you know someone who needs support now, they can help you take the next step towards finding hope and healing.
There is hope. 988sc.org.
The one little thing that I wanted to mention about this episode is they do a couple of really neat cutscenes that just cut right into the action of a completely different scene, but the scene prior to it led into it, that I thought was really good.
And they overlap the sound.
Yeah,
it's fun when they do that.
There's like usually one sentence from the prior moment in the new scene.
Yeah, it bleeds
so you
right
get
to
this
it,
linkage.
which they do very well. I like that.
You know, it's Halloween season, spooky season, so I've been rewatching all of my favorite horror movies, and obviously it includes both the original film 2 parts and the newer one, and I just love the fact that in Buffy, Oz is a werewolf, and then in It, he is Richie, who is chased by a werewolf,
right.
and it just... Every time I'm just like, I watched that a couple weeks ago, and watching this one, I was like, that's good. I like that.
I completely forgot about that until the minute you said, look, I got chill. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I completely forgot about that.
Such a nice little tidbit that's so satisfying. And he was great as Richie. I loved him. Like, he's just an excellent actor. But during October, that point seems... Like, I have to point that out.
I just think Seth Green overall is overlooked. He as a person, he seems very much like the character of Oz. Like, he seems very sure of himself.
Yes.
Obviously his dad, was in the business too. He directed this episode, but I think that everything that he's ever been in, the Italian Job he was in, he's fantastic in that. Like, he plays like a core like piece that's sort of like the glue that kind of holds everything together, and he's just so overlooked. And now of course he directs and produces, and
I think he has a life that he likes.
Oh, for sure.
I think he does not want to be more in the spotlight. I think he's very happy making Robot Chicken.
Yeah.
One of my favorite appearances of Seth Green is Enemy of the State, where he's a bad guy in that.
Yeah.
Oh
and
my gosh, I forgot about that.
It's such a fun role for him. And Jack Black isn't, like, he and Jack Black work together for the bad guys. It's really fun. And of course, I mean, Scott Evil, he got lots of attention for playing Scott Evil. Great. And I think it was probably after that he was like, you know what? Maybe behind the camera is where I want to be. I think I'm good of being famous, and I'm just going to step back. But he was in also Can't Hardly Wait, which is a fantastic performance.
That's such a great movie.
With the goggles and everything. Like, he's so hilarious.
He's so precious and funny. He's hysterical in that. But I don't know. The mention of... I thought of Angelus again and talking about the whole werewolf thing, and Jim, when you pointed out the mic drop moment where they said, they reference phases in the episode before, I love how we also have all just adopted that Steveism for when the name of the episode is mentioned. It's just, it's a mic drop moment. Anybody that doesn't know what that is, listen to more Podcastica. But... I love that. But the fact that this episode, not only is it significant for the season and it's a great episode, but I love that it carries things together throughout the series. Like, there's a sprinkle of Angel and Jealous as the big bad that we see, and the play on phases and changes and all these transformations. Like, Buffy is still dealing with the change that's happened with Angel to Angelus, and you've got Teresa, who literally changes into a vampire, and Oz transforming, and all of these relationships that are going through changes, and just the little threads that they weave throughout the series and the season are very satisfying.
For compared to the past two episodes, on the outside looking in, seems like a very simple episode, but it very much is a quilt. Like, it ties an episode, the witch episode from season 1, it pulls into it. It gives us a whole brand new depth of character with Oz, who goes from being like a slight love interest to now like a major player.
So three-dimensional.
Yeah, when the simple episodes get complex, but not in an overcomplicated way, it just, again, adds such value to the series. And that's why, starting with Surprise, I really think that the show hits its stride, and it does carry for a bit, which is great. Like, this whole Angelus twist was so brilliant. And I was just listening a little bit to the pod from last week, and that David Boreanaz, like, I'm so sad. Like, he's my favorite character in the whole series, because, well, not this series. He's my favorite character in the universe, I guess, just because that's the show that I started with.
Yeah.
But I just watching him being that brooding. I remember watching the first season a couple of weeks, like 3-4 weeks ago, thinking like it almost felt like they weren't quite sure what to do with David Boreanaz, but clearly
it's true.
Like,
they figured it out.
Yeah. They clearly figured it out. And knowing like his future, this like arc is so important to the rest. I got to be on more shows because you have so much to say. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
So
that's what we want, super fans. That's what makes the world go round.
It's true.
Listeners, we love you. We want to hear from you. We love hearing how much you love Buffy.
Yes, please. And remember, you can send in feedback for any episode. We can play it, during the episode if it's not spoiler free. If it is spoiler free, and then we can always address spoilerly. I can't do it.
Spoilery
is not working. Yes, thank you. Feedback in the spoiler section, in our Watcher Diary section, because I want to know. I know that we are not the only people that continue to nerd out about Buffy.
Oh no,
like,
there's a lot of Buffy lovers out there. So we want to hear from you guys and join the conversation.
It is Ryan here, and I have a question for you. What do you do when you win? Like, are you a fist pumper, a woohooer, a hand clapper, a high fiver? I kind of like the high five, but if you want to hone in on those winning moves, check out Chumba Casino. At ChumbaCasino.com, choose from hundreds of social casino-style games for your chance to redeem serious cash prizes. There are new game releases weekly, plus free daily bonuses. So don't wait. Start having the most fun ever at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
That brings us to an important question. And Jim, I'm going to ask you first. Does it still slay?
Does it still slay? I mean, yes, of course it still slays. You come off of Innocence and you think, oh, this doesn't, Angelus is only in it for like a minute. But again, it adds depth. It plays such an important role going forward. So does it still slay? Of course it still slays. Yes, for sure.
Kara?
I have to agree with Jim. It's hard to follow an episode like Innocence and that duo of episodes. But this it was like the perfect thing to follow those. And anytime we get to see Oz, it's a great episode for me.
I have to agree as well. I think that the tone shift from Surprise and Innocence being so fraught with like the sadness, and then this episode that is lighter and funnier, and it gives us a break from the tragedy of Angelus a little bit to focus on some other characters. And we'll go back to the tragedy soon enough. We'll be there, so
don't you worry.
Yeah, plenty of tragedy to come. So it does definitely still slay, in my opinion. We don't have any news. Big surprise. Nor do we have any listener feedback. So that marks the end of the main section of the podcast today.
Stay tuned if you want to hear the spoilery section.
I'm so glad you had to say that and not me. I couldn't have done it today. But if, lovely listeners, you would like to join the conversation or find out more about Podcastica, you can find all of our contact information at podcastica.com.
And you can write in or record a voice message, and I highly recommend doing that. I just started doing it about 6 months ago. It's awesome. It's easy to do, but you can do it right here on podcastica.com. Or you can find links to our social media pages and other shows. You can also, just do a memo on your phone and you can email it to Podcastica. You can find all of that information on podcastica.com. And there are so many shows that you can listen to. I mean, I get stressed out every week because there's so many podcasts and you don't want to miss any of them. But the one that I'm finding the most joy in right now is Ben and Kristen doing Ted Lasso after them doing 5.5 years of Lost, which is definitely a hard-hitting show. Ted Lasso is amazing. But Ben and Kristen are clearly super fans, as I think we all are. But just having a nice 1 hour podcast on a show that makes me smile, and they know it so well that they add so much depth to the show if you haven't seen it. So I highly recommend Ted Lasso amongst about a billion other shows that you can kind of go and listen to, like Yellow Jackets, for example. I watched Yellow Jackets strictly because you guys were going to do a podcast on it. And so again, it's one of those things that it's an awesome rabbit. There are a lot of shows that I don't even watch anymore, and I still listen to the podcast because of the family atmosphere of all the podcasts.
It's true. Like, I personally don't really enjoy Great British Bake Off. I don't completely understand the appeal of watching people make sweet treats that you aren't going to get to eat. but they're covering it on Strange Indeed, and I find their conversation really delightful. And it's a nice change of pace from, I listen to a lot of podcasts about deep, dark, heavy, stressful shows. I listen to podcasts about politics and, current events. That's always really stressful. So then listening to just a lighthearted conversation about Great British Bake Off is just, it's like soothing and relaxing. It's wonderful.
It's refreshing. And the fact that it's on Strange Indeed, which covers some of the more, kind of intense, dark shows that Podcastica does cover. It's just a nice little fluff. But I am already hooked on Strange Indeed's coverage of The Fall of the House of Usher. I binge watched that show in 2 nights, and I've been rewatching it again as they're covering it, and I'm a sucker for anything Edgar Allan Poe. Like, it's that stereotypical English major part of me, and listening to them talk about it has been so much fun already. So even if you're not, like you guys both said, I listen to so many of the Podcastica shows just because I enjoy, all of our different hosts and feeling like I can be part of the conversation. Like, it's just, try it out. There's something for everybody to listen to, and
we're all such a family. Like, listen, y'all, like, we're all such a family here.
Such a positive
I just like, the best podcasts are the ones where you get to hear family kind of like get into each other a little bit, don't always agree. I love podcasting with everybody because I love hearing new ideas, but I also love listening to them because, like I said, this is the first time I've met both of these awesome ladies, but I've been listening to them for, it seems like, forever. So I just hearing Penny's like accent like in live and in person is fantastic. So I know I'm fanning a little bit, but I just, like, every show that I'm on, and I get this blessing of being able to podcast with y'all, like, I just can't say it enough. If you've made it this far in this episode, please listen to the podcast. Please send in feedback and click every button you can, because this network is it's strong and it's awesome, and there's definitely going to be something that you like.
It's a wonderful community, and I know for a lot of people during the pandemic that being part of the Podcastica community and the Patreon group, which has a whole extra layer of community to it, was a literal lifesaver when people were, stuck, isolated at home and, couldn't socialize. It provided an outlet for people to have a social life, and it's such an important service that it provided. I joined at the tail end of that, and I love being a part of this community. I joined the same way you did, Jim. I listened for a long time, and then I started sending in some voicemails, and then the next thing I knew, I was podcasting with Jason. and then the timing just worked out for Yellow Jackets.
Yeah.
That was kind of magic. It was perfect.
That is a magical podcast, y'all. You have to listen to that podcast. You have to watch that show. The show is absolutely crazy. So
if you like powerful women and subverting tropes about women, Yellow Jackets is for you. Oh, and teenage issues.
Oh,
disaster
in a horror
shows,
setting. Yeah,
survivalist. A little bit of
amazing 90s music. The music on Yellow Jackets is phenomenal. I love that show, but I don't recommend it to everyone. I'm always like, it's not for everybody. It is kind of dark, and there are probably cannibals, and like it's not for everybody.
But if you haven't watched it, you'll probably know in the first 3 minutes whether or not you'll want to watch it.
Yeah,
that opening sequence is pretty powerful. I felt bad. I recommended it to one of my friends. She was like, "What are you watching?" And this was when it had first come out, and everybody in the Podcastica and like Zedhead Facebook group were like, "We gotta watch this show. This show's fantastic." And so I watched it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so good. And she asked me what I was watching, and then she told me she had nightmares for a week after the first episode. And I was just like, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, not for everyone.
She's like, how can you watch this? I was like, I think it's fascinating. I don't know what to tell you.
Like, that's like, I love The Boys, and now I've really been loving Gen V, which is the spinoff.
Oh, I haven't started that yet.
I recommend that to very few people. It is a level of violence and gore that is not gonna be good for most people.
Well,
you have to really brace yourself.
Yeah, The Boys. I went back and rewatched it, and I was like, how did I watch this the first time? Like, oh my gosh. All right.
Sometimes, you know, if you watch super violent things when you're stressed out, it feels almost cathartic. And then if you watch it again in a different state of mind, you're like, oh.
That's why, that's why I watch Buffy, so I can watch her kick some ass.
Yeah, it is cathartic to watch her, especially when she kicks ass of someone who's like a giant jerk, like Kane.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
It's true. We might need to do like a segment where we have like the most satisfying kill or fight sequence or something of the week.
Oh, that'd be a good like between
episode.
Yeah,
like
between seasons episode. Yeah.
Oh, that would be fun. I'm all right. Okay, I'll think about that later.
All right.
Okay.
But, so,
all right,
listeners. You hadn't
Nope.
said that part.
And
Never mind.
wait. And if you like what we do, hit like, follow, and subscribe. If you haven't figured it out from the previous part, that's where I'm at. It really helps other listeners find us and show up in the algorithm.
Yes, and next time we'll be covering season 2, episode 16, Bewitched, Bothered, and Bewildered.
Talk to you next time. Thanks, everyone. And so I'd
very still.
Okay. No biting, though.
All right, that's the end of the non-spoiler section. If you want to avoid spoilers, you should stop listening right now.
It is Ryan here, and I have a question for you. What do you do when you win? Like, are you a fist pumper, a woohooer, a hand clapper, a high fiver? I kind of like the high five, but if you want to hone in on those winning moves, check out Chumba Casino. At ChumbaCasino.com, choose from hundreds of social casino-style games for your chance to redeem serious cash prizes. There are new game releases weekly, plus free daily bonuses. So don't wait. Start having the most fun ever at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. BTW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
And on to the Watcher's Diaries.
It's too bad we can't sneak a look at the Watcher Diaries. I'm sure it's full of fun facts to know and tell.
Yeah, that's too bad. That stuff is private.
Also, Giles keeps them in his office, in his personal files.
Most importantly, it would be wrong.
Now we can just, indulge ourselves in spoilerific conversation as much as we want. And I have been dying to say that I think the werewolf costume in this episode looks horrible. It's so bad.
You know what? Though? Especially knowing where we're going, like, because obviously it gets better. But the campiness, I loved it. It's so bad.
Yeah.
But I'm like, because that scene at the beginning, like, calls back to Thriller. Like, when Willow's running through the woods. Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's so called back to Thriller, except for the fact that this like me with like a werewolf head on my head. It's so bad.
Yeah, it's just like a lumbering dude in a costume.
Like,
and then later they use prosthetics and they actually like paste the werewolf fur and everything and face onto Seth Green, and he's much smaller than the werewolf in this episode, and he's like, he runs on all fours later, and he's more like jumpy and bouncy than this werewolf.
Different.
But weirdly, years later on Angel, they go back to this goofy looking werewolf costume.
They do.
It kind of adds to its campy charm sometimes. It reminds me of like some of the earlier seasons and, the first season of the reboot of Doctor Who, where the costumes are just kind of Riley.
Or the old Doctor Who, where you're like, is that a trash can painted red? Like,
yes!
Just really. And old Star Trek, too, right? There's old Star Trek, you can sometimes identify, like, household items that are being used as weapons on a spaceship.
Like a plunger on a Dalek or something. Like, clearly my dog wants to talk about spoilers and Buffy, too. But I just... Riley?
His name is Riley.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Like, well, it's,
full
Buffy
circle.
Related, kind of. But this is my 14-year-old who I know is very vocal. But that is fine, because I did want to talk about Riley. Riley, not you. I really can't wait until we get to Riley, because all this talk about masculinity and these different tropes, can't help but think of when Riley appears and the type of boyfriend he is for Buffy compared to Angel is just night and day. And I feel like they kind of lay the groundwork for that early on. And Riley's so unexpected, especially from what we see in season 2 and season 3, that I think it makes me appreciate him more as a character each rewatch. And every time you mentioned Riley, especially at the beginning, like, you know what? I think I'm gonna enjoy him even more this time around.
Yeah.
But well, what's fun about him too is Mark Lucas. Now that I've grown up and I no longer hold basketball grudges, he's really embraced the show. He shows up at conventions here and there, and his character is taken as much flack as any character in any of the episodes, and he shows up and he's answered all the questions that they've asked, and again, having seen that part of the series twice now, I think that character, and I'm going to be honest with you too, listening to you I'm so entwined with Angel and Angelus that when you started talking about how creepy it was for a 240-year-old, and it just got me thinking, like David Boreanaz is it's not in an inappropriate way, but he's so much older than all the other cast. Like, he's I think when this series started, he was 28 or 27 or 28, and I think Sarah Michelle Gellar was 20, and all the other characters are like 20, 19, 18. I just, now every time I look at him, I'm like, ew,
yeah, old man.
That's kind of funny. Yeah, he was like 8 years older than her or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, when you're in, early 20s to late, like, that's a pretty significant difference in maturity and life stages. But with Angel, like, the way that they play it I just accept it for the most part. And then if I think about it too hard, or something will happen where I'm like, oh yeah, he is really old, this is not great. But they do a good job of making it seem completely natural and normal, especially once you get to the Angel spinoff, which also Jack Connery, who played Kane, pops up.
Sajan,
he's
Angel,
Sajan,
which is
I love Sajan.
He's great.
Yeah,
he's hilarious.
Way better.
Yeah,
way better.
So funny.
But that is
such a fun
very
character.
satisfying little.
Well, and I know that this
and
is a spoiler section. I mean, like his ending scene at Angel is with Connor is so fantastic. The quips they're throwing.
Connor.
Since I've rewatched Angel, I've gotten such appreciation of Connor's character more, because I hated his character the first time I watched through it, and I watched it a second time and I was like, oh my gosh, he's great. Like, anyways,
Connor was a really fun addition to that show, and having him disappear and come back grown is such a hilarious trope, right? Yep. Like, so many shows have children that go from baby to like 5-year-old in one season, and having Connor get all the way grown up it cracks me up every time. I'm like, oh, it's cousin Oliver, or it's Christine on Bones, who is a baby and then a 5-year-old
Oh,
overnight.
yeah. That one is pretty wild. And there are lots of, I don't know, like little tidbits about this episode that come back later on. Like, obviously, the one we kind of talked about earlier with Willow being referenced by Oz as an evil mastermind. And she's like, how early on did they have Willow's arc planned? Because at this point in time, you know, I think there's in a couple articles, there's references about that conversation between Larry and Xander. And at that point, you know, JW did not know whether it was going to be Willow or Xander who they wrote as a gay character eventually in the series. So it very well could have been foreshadowing for Xander. And it really makes me wonder how early on they had that plan for Willow to kind of turn and become evil. Because we see it, like little hints of it pretty early on in this show. And
this season, every time they give her, you know, she starts to play around with magic. And very early in season 3, Giles is all like, magic is dark, be careful. And she's like, I like the dark arts. Like, she's not afraid of the evil part. She just she's so hungry for power and for knowledge that it's inevitable that she goes down a dark path. I think they knew around now that they wanted to turn her dark, and that line for Oz was very intentional.
So satisfying. Well, and then, we all talked about how much we love Oz, and one of the things that stands out in this one, and I have these DVDs, I used to listen to this commentary to go to sleep on, especially the earlier seasons, but Marty Noxon mentions in this episode in the commentary that this episode Phases is kind of viewed as the first of 3, the first in a trilogy. And I was like, can we just get more than that? And then the others, are Wild at Heart and then New Moon Rising. And I remember still the first watch throughout the series when Veruca shows up, this female werewolf, and that dynamic shift with her and Oz and Willow, and hearing him talk about it as a trilogy, I was like, if we could have gotten a spin-off, something with Oz, because we know he goes off to, where does he go? Like in the comics.
Nepal.
Yeah.
That's right. To study about and learn more about being a werewolf and the history and all that stuff, and remembering that commentary just makes me kind of sad we didn't get to explore it further.
There must be Oz comics though, right? I haven't read
I think there
a lot
are
of the comics.
Yeah, I know he's at least got like an arc in the season 8 comic, but I don't know what actually happens or how in depth that is.
I wonder if, because if I recall, like near the end of Buffy, and at the same time with Angel, like starting in Angel season 3, like that's when the talk of like canceling the series, like season 6, season 7 of Buffy, and season 2, season 3 of Angel, there was already talk of whether they were going to cancel. I just remember Marsters would go on a campaign, at the end of the Buffy series, how much he loved it and how much the show should keep going, and then the eventual shift over to Angel, he really wanted it to keep going after season 5. I wonder if maybe that was a thought, but they couldn't carry it out because the show was sagging, even though I think compared to today's numbers, it was still doing pretty well. But and I know some of the characters didn't want to keep doing it, but it would have been a great.
There was talk of a Giles spinoff.
Yeah.
That was going to be called The Watcher, and there was talk of a Faith spinoff, which I was really rooting for.
Yeah.
I love Faith, and not just because she's from Massachusetts. I
she's
think she's
dynamic.
great.
She has a great arc in both series.
Always entertaining.
Yeah.
She's nonstop fun.
Yeah.
And there were really, like, I think I I must have skipped over that in my notes earlier, but I loved how there were so many references to previous episodes in this one. Like, you know, they always do a little callback here and there, but when Xander was going off about how, like, it's work for Buffy, like, I wouldn't have a head, like, back to that Praying Mantis episode. And, you know, the hyena one, we talked about that. And then Willow would be Robbie the robot's love slave, like that comment from him.
Yeah.
Back to iRobot. Like, it's just, I love when they do that. And I think it's kind of that type of writing where they give like a little wink to their audience and make you feel like smart or good for catching something like that. Keeps you drawn in.
It's rewarding. There's actually academic study on this. The serial form of any kind of TV show has evolved over many decades, but soap operas really learned the nuts and bolts of how to keep a viewer and reward a viewer. So you have to have foreshadowing that a savvy, knowing viewer might notice. Like, hey, that sounds like that's going to be important. And you have to have references to the past to reward for somebody being a loyal viewer. And soap operas do it much more heavily, where there's like a lot more back references and a lot more foreshadowing, because soap operas are also designed for people to only half watch them. But all series, if they're doing their writing correctly, should be sprinkling in these little like dopamine hits where your viewers get to be like, ooh, I'm in on the joke. And it's just this little reward that keeps you coming back for more.
And you have to do it in a way that's palatable and not complex, because you don't want to lose either side of it. I think when Marvel was great, it was doing that, and then it got way too heavy. I don't think Buffy ever gets too heavy in that. I think they always handle that well, and I think Angel carries that on, because when you get a second series, it can get even more complex. But but I think they peppered it very well, and for sure.
Yeah, Angel is. I can't wait till we get there and we are covering both shows. I think we'll probably do like back and forth of the episodes, and because the Angel series just goes in some really different directions that Buffy can't go in, and it gets more cosmic, right? They like travel dimensions and stuff like that. It's a lot of fun.
Well, and it's an older show, you know. I mean, I think that the whole reason why I watched Buffy at all was because I tied into, you know, they're more my age. Still was able to go back and connect with Buffy, but I think that you know, but yet it still ties into that humor. We still have Cordy. There was a couple of really good characters in the initial part of that show that I really loved. But I think the one thing that from this episode that carries on, just this whole arc of Angelus that we get to see multiple times. The one interesting thing too about this is, like, Angelus is killing people again, and it becomes very fascinating in season 3 watching everybody dealing with Angel back as Angel, now dealing with a very evident murderer, and watching David Boreanaz handle that and watching the whole other cast handle that is very, very fascinating. And it's so clear to me when you watch season 3 that they're heading to maybe a spinoff for Angel, because you almost can't stay in Sunnydale after that.
They talk about it in the director's commentary for Becoming parts 1 and 2 at the end of this season. That the scene where the two of them are having the sword fight was when apparently Joss Whedon was like, this guy could carry his own show. That's when he decided that David Boreanaz could be the star of his own show. And it is a truly magical scene. That sword fight is amazing. I'm excited to get there. It's so good. Everything about Becomings Part 1 and 2 are so fun. We get flashbacks, we get Spike, it's just
everything.
Iconic.
It's everything
so many
that
goodies.
makes this series fantastic.
You know, it's so funny. I will say, if there's anybody that has, watched all of Buffy and has never bothered to watch Angel and you're listening to the spoiler section, give Angel a chance. Go watch it, because I remember having this kind of like Buffy hangover once I had fully finished it. I was like, what am I going to watch now? This has taken up so much time. And then starting Angel, and the way that show begins to where it ends up, it's beautifully done. Like the Pylea storyline, like once we get to Over the Rainbow in season 2, that is just, I will still just randomly think about that episode during the day and be like, God, that's brilliant. Like it's the world building, and it's just so fantastic. So if you have never given Angel a chance, definitely do that.
The crossover characters are so amazing. The crossovers are amazing.
They really are.
Wesley, the new characters the new characters that are added.
Fred. I love Fred so much.
I just
and Lorne.
Fred.
Oh my God.
Lorne is fantastic.
And let me tell you something. Like it's so hard to land a series. And I think they land Angel in such an amazing way. Mm-hmm. And I just remember at the end of it going, when you end a series and you're going, so might there be another season? Or, they're all dead. When you end on that note, like they're either going to keep going or they're all dead. Like when you land it like that, it ended so flippin' perfect. Oh my gosh. And it sucks because I want to go back and rewatch it, but I'm not going to do it. I'm going to.
Until we get there?
Yeah. I have to wait because that's how I watched it originally. And the only rewatch that I've done was that way. So I've got to wait. And it drives me nuts because now I want to go back to watch the Connor parts again, but I'm not going to. So I'll wait for you guys.
Yeah, we'll get there. It comes up, Connor. On my Hulu streaming screen. Yes. It always suggests Angel. You watched Buffy. You probably want to watch Angel. So I just watched Bones. I'm like, okay, I'm going to watch an episode of Bones. So I get my David Boreanaz hit and I get it a little bit out of my system, and then I can move on.
Oh my gosh. It's perfect.
All right.
I feel like we do this every time. Where we get to the spoilery section, we just have so much fun talking about the Buffy-verse that it's just like a tangent into all the great things. It's like, wait a second. We can rein it in. We have to save it.
Yeah.
It's so hard not to just
we'll get there. We'll get
it's
there.
Just so good.
Well, I think on that note, we should wrap it up because we've been recording for almost 2 hours now. And I think we've done justice to this episode, to Phases. Yeah. I feel pretty good about that.
That's a good one.
So that's the complete end of our show. Thank you guys for listening if you stayed with us this long. And until next time, I'm Penny.
And I'm Kara.
And I'm Jim.
Keep slaying.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
With Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to... Has anyone seen the bride and groom?
Sorry, we're here. We were getting lucky in the limo and we lost track of time.
No, Lucky Land Casino, with cash prizes that add up quicker than a guest registry.
In that case, I pronounce you lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Daily bonuses are waiting. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Hey guys, it is Ryan. I'm not sure if you know this about me, but I'm a bit of a fun fanatic when I can. I like to work, but I like fun too. It's a thing. And now the truth is out there. I can tell you about my favorite place to have fun. Chumba Casino. They have hundreds of social casino style games to choose from with new games released each week. You can play for free anytime, anywhere. And each day brings a new chance to collect daily bonuses. So join me in the fun. Sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. BTW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. BTW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Are you struggling to lose weight and keep it off? Tired of wasting time and money on starvation diets that lead to more frustration and stress? If there was a weight loss solution that could actually work for you, would you try it? Then head to Golo.com.
I'm Steve. I lost 138 pounds in 9 months on Golo.
I'm Amber. I've lost 128 pounds with Golo.
If you're ready to take back control of your life, head to Golo.com now and see how Golo can work for you. That's Golo.com.
My sleep is way better. My inflammation has gone way down. Golo saved my life. I was way overweight. That's what sent me down the path. I wanted to make sure and live for my kid.
I have literally tried everything. I was on the verge of getting gastric bypass surgery, and I saw the Golo commercial, and it was the last thing I tried because it worked.
Join over 2 million people who found a better way to lose weight with Golo. Your healthier and happier life begins at Golo.com. That's Golo.com. Again, Golo.com.